Hello, and welcome to Illumination. This is the program that we highlight the goodness that God is doing. God is raising up an army of believers. He's calling us out of the darkness and into his marvelous light. And we are so pleased that we who have been called into the marvelous light are now serving the living God, the God of creation, the God of the universe, the God who deserves all praise, all glory, all honor, because he and he alone is worthy to be praised. And we are at a time in our history that we see the enemy is looking like he is winning. But God is still in control. God will have the last word. His will shall be done. Tonight, we have with us two really wonderful people who are going to share a story about what they are doing in the life of our community. I have as my guest for tonight Miss Fairly St. Louis and Miss Sankufa. Hello, ladies. How are you?
We're well, Reverend.
All right. I'm happy that you could be with us tonight. And the topic that we're going to be discussing is one that I find really important. It's the topic of infant mortality. And the numbers, when I heard you speak a few weeks ago, the numbers were just astounding. I could not believe how disparaging the numbers were. It makes African American people look like we're in a third world nation, even worse than a third world nation. So I wanted to talk to you to share the work that you're doing and what we can do as a people to make life better for everyone. Tell me, Fairly, tell us about yourself.
Okay, thank you. I am Fairly Ayodele St. Louis. I act in many roles in my life, one and primarily of which I'm a mother of a beautiful 7-year-old son. I am also a sexual reproductive justice advocate. That's how I came into this work, really as a birth worker, a doula. I'm also an artist. I'm an activist on many fronts, but this is particularly a passion of mine because I gave birth in New York City, and it wasn't the best experience for me. Being treated by the residents and the practitioners in the hospitals, they weren't very sensitive to my birthing experience. So realizing later on that I could have had a more empowering experience, I definitely dedicated myself to making that experience a reality for other mothers, because as you mentioned, Black women are 12 times more likely to die in childbirth than white women in New York City, and 3 times more likely nationally. And if we're talking about Harlem statistics, we're talking about infant mortality. The central Harlem area, neighborhood area, ranks number 3 in infant death in New York City neighborhood. In New York City. And East Harlem, it ranks 15. So those numbers are very disparaging, and something needs to be done. And so we're opening up this dialogue, and we're really grateful that you had us here on the show to do so.
I'm so glad
Thank you
to
to illuminate
the
this travesty, really.
Exactly. And we also have with us Miss Sankufa.
Sankofa Ra.
Sankofa Ra. Amen.
Yes. Greetings, everyone. I'm grateful to be here. I'm born and raised in New York. My family, my mother's side is from Georgia. My father's side is from St. Lucia in the Caribbean. I'm a womb priestess, traditional midwife, continuing building on the legacies of my ancestors who were midwives, healers, seers, herbalists, farmers. So, I started on this path back in 2010, and I started as a doula because there's not really too many avenues or opportunities available for women who want to get into midwifery. But you know, that was something that was methodically changed because the black midwife was the pivotal person for black and white people, especially in the South, for birthing babies, well woman care. But yes, you know, I offer doula services, which is like a non-medical professional who offers informational, educational, and physical support during a mother's pregnancy, during the birthing, and also after. So there's different types of doulas who, you know, cover the spectrum. I also offer educational and healing programs and workshops because as an African American community, we have a lot of trauma that is still not really dealt with, or, you know, there's trauma that really is that we deal with today, but which also is ancestral. So there's a lot of trauma that we've gone through as a people that we have to address and that we have to heal through, which also affects us when we're going through birth, when we're pregnant. It comes up, everything that you think that is not an issue that you deal with either spiritually, mentally, and physically, it becomes so much more brought out to the front when you're pregnant.
If I immediately thought about the midwives that we would see in the book of Exodus, when Pharaoh had made a law that all the male infants are to be thrown into the Nile. And the midwives refused to obey the law, but they were keeping the children and preserving them, and how they were playing a real important role in that whole birthing process, as you say. But yet and still, it's kind of has gone under the radar because, you know, it's like, well, what is actually, you know, your background and profession? And as you were talking, Fairly, I was thinking of the scripture again that says children are a gift from God. And that birthing event, experience should be a blessing, but for it to be one of trauma and for it to be one that takes on so much negativity, again indicates how far away we've come. And as you said, our ancestors, from the South, you know, the story, which probably is not just a story or a folktale, how they would say the women were in the field picking cotton, give birth to the child right while they were in the field, and continued to do the work, you know. Right. So yeah, we have to pay homage to our ancestors because you're right. Without them and the strength that the women showed, you know, and the courage that they had to show, we wouldn't be here today. How has your birth of your son, put you on this trail, and what have you done to now?
So it was a significant experience for me because I created a birthing plan, and what that is basically steps to how you want and you envision your birth. I had my physician sign off on it, and it was all peachy clean. It was an agreement. It was basically a contract between the two of us. And then the day of my birth, you know, the residents were taking care of me. You know, I labored at home for as much as I could, but when I got to the hospital, you know, it was a lot of, ma'am, keep your gown on, you know, not offering me support and comfort, but like making me feel insecure in a moment where I'm extremely vulnerable. And it is a life or death situation.
It is.
And, you know, trying to encourage me to be induced. At one point, this resident, you know, wanted to check to see how far my dilation was. And without my permission, he skipped my cervix, which is basically trying to, you know, make the process a little more rapid for me to dilate quicker. And I told him, don't touch me anymore, because he has no right to do something without my consent, without my permission.
And so women need to know what their rights are and what's going on.
Exactly. You know, I was able to go to a prominent midwife in the Harlem area. Her name is Nankululeko. She actually just had this conference last weekend on the 15th. It's called the Harlem Action Birth Committee, Mama Power, and it's basically for expecting mothers who are, getting ready to go on their journey or far along in their journey, and giving them, different incentives, but also information about the process of birth. Showing, documentaries about grand midwives, or, how women in Africa give birth, and how to just normalize the experience, because socially we are really not having these conversations. We're not educated on something that's so natural and happens daily, Every day is somebody's birthday, but we don't really know the nooks and the crannies of what goes on. And so that was an experience that I personally experienced when I was pregnant.
So Sankofa, when do you get involved in the process?
I'm not what would they call, like a licensed midwife, because I'm not licensed to practice in that setting. The midwife is there to really provide full spectrum support to the mother, even with what we call preconception, because a lot of the issues really get nipped in the bud before you even become pregnant. So there's not a lot of preventive action, education. A lot of women don't think about, okay, I know at some point I want to have a baby. What do I do to get my body ready? What do I do to get spiritually, mentally, financially, physically ready to bring another person into this world? We're not taught to think like that. And that's something that really needs to change. We need to start thinking like that, because it would make a huge difference in, not just the whole birthing process, but it make a whole difference in the quality of life, being prepared as an adult, to bring another person. But my focus is really preconception, because that's really where you can really make huge changes. I really look at it as starting with the children, because it has to be like a mindset, like getting children doing things that are so much part of their everyday way of being and living, that that by the time they get to that point where they are adults, or that they the women become pregnant, it's like they've already been doing things that's been part of their everyday way of being. That way they're prepared. You can avoid things like preeclampsia,
right, hypertension,
hypertension, gestation diabetes, just in the things that you do, the way you eat, the way you live your life, the relationships that you have, they all are very important, in the whole, birthing.
There's always that question of where does life begin, and life, does it begin at conception? Does it begin before conception? Does it begin at birth? And, as you're talking, I was thinking back of, I saw a documentary a while about a rap star who, his mother was in prison.
Tupac Shakur?
Tupac, yeah, while she was carrying him. And just the trauma from being in prison had on him, going up, And so, yeah, you could see the need for your plan to be, and even as you're saying, the pre-planning, it's also interesting because we say, nothing happens by accident. God is in control. He knows all the moves and everything that is going to be made. So even with this, how is God, how is the ancestors, how are the universal rhythms all being played out, to the extent that our people, as you say, are really struggling with this. As I was saying before, our people are perishing for the lack of knowledge. You mentioned earlier, you said Harlem.
Oh, Harlem Birth Action Committee.
Yeah. Explain some of the things that they do.
I mean, that's just one entity that supports birth workers, and that can be doulas, midwives, and all of the spectrum of birth workers. There are different entities like Uptown Doula Collective, There is Ancient Song Doula Services. There are community-based centers, the Action Center in East Harlem and Central Harlem. Family Wellness Suite, creating breastfeeding-friendly communities. There's like a ton of resources that support mothers in different areas and different, spaces in the process, different times in the process, whether strictly breastfeeding, after giving birth, or supporting you in your healing after giving birth to the baby, or during the birthing process, or just giving you information prior to. So that's what these different entities serve. It's not necessarily a school, but it is a wealth of information.
Where would someone go to find these resources if they were unfamiliar?
I would say, definitely being plugged into community spaces and centers is very important. Doing a simple search online. The spaces that people find trustworthy and trusting is really important because they can give information. For instance, the church. The church is like a center, a safe space for folks and their families to come and get information. So being able to, kind of have the churches come together with community entities, that would be an easy stop for a teenager in need who doesn't know where to go. Yeah, it's all about partnership. But yeah, I would do a Google search initially, but also there's, again, if we're talking about Harlem and East Harlem, Central Harlem, there are the action centers in East Harlem that it's like a one-stop shop of a lot of information.
So then there really isn't any excuse.
No.
There isn't an excuse, but you have to be connected to kind of like know where to look. I was fortunate enough, like, you need to know what you're looking for. And if we're not taught what we're looking for, how do we search?
It can be right in front of you.
It could be right in front of you. In the abundance of water, the fool is thirsty, right?
Yeah. Have there been steps along those lines to bring coalitions together to start working on this problem?
There have been initiatives on, it seems like, the city's front, the Office of Faith-Based Initiatives, where I met you at the Health Summit. There are also initiatives that the governor and the mayor have been putting forth. There's a standard of care now that just was launched about a week ago through Birth Action Defenders, and the sexual justice community engagement groups. There also is the task force to end, maternal mortality in New York City through Cuomo's task force. So there are different spaces, but it's just like they need to be pushed to the forefront. Like this dialogue needs to be propelled to the forefront. And it's up to politicians, educators, and faith leaders to kind of bring that to the people.
There also seems to be a disconnect. As you say, when you went to the hospital, your very physician and those people that were employed to provide direct care did not seem to care to the level of professionalism that you expected.
Yeah, that's a whole other ball game because unfortunately we are socially educated to see the physician as an authority figure. And because we kind of like push our well-being into that arena because they get paid salaries to think for us on that level. When what we don't realize is there is an aspect of business to it where the humanity of it gets removed. And it becomes well, you might need some Pitocin to further dilate you so that we can, give you a cesarean, because if you use a surgical tool, that's a business move,
Right.
You have to order more supplies, right?
So would the midwives be recognized more in this arena than they are now?
They are.
You have home birth midwives, you have hospitals. It's like the sooner you start searching and looking, the more you can really get closer to having or fulfilling the birth vision that you have for yourself. But today you have like all these apps. You got something called the Arch app, which will be coming out soon, which brings all the resources, everything that you want to know about maternal health providers. It's all going to be there in the app, because so many of us, we just look at our phones. We're on our phones so much in a day. So you have the Arch app. You have the National Black Doulas Association, which also has like a conglomerate of resources for Black women to find doulas and other healthcare providers in their area, depending on where they live. You have sistermidwife.com, which is also another directory for mothers to find like Black midwives, doulas, other Black healthcare providers. And we have to remember that racism is institutional. You have racism that's very real in the hospitals, in the healthcare system, and not everyone is really interested in your well-being. And you have to be proactive in asking questions, regardless of who they are, where you at. This is your body. You have rights to your own physical well-being to always make a choice.
And in the past, it's been harder to find midwives because it becomes a matter of affordability at times, and sometimes birth workers do need to make a living, so they do charge a fee, and sometimes they do give back births where it's free of charge and it's pro bono. But recently, New York State legislation passed, Medicaid coverage for doulas and midwives, but I believe it was in Erie County and some zip codes in Brooklyn.
Only the places that have the highest infant, Black infant and maternal mortality rates.
For now, but that's a step.
Yeah, it's a
right?
pilot. It's a pilot program.
It's a pilot.
Now there's insurance that would cover
Medicaid coverage.
It's coverage, but it's still, once again, the pay, the reimbursement is so low that not too many doulas are willing to partake in it, because it's a profession. People have to eat.
And that speaks to the racial institution, the racism that exists, because if it was highly valued, if our lives as Black women were valued, they would allow us to, they would cover the cost of that support.
Yeah. How does the spiritual aspect of being a doula and being one, connected to the creation, how does that come into play?
It depends on, how you're coming. There's no standards with the whole doula profession. So I come with it from a spiritual perspective, because to me it's spiritual.
And so explain that, your spiritual.
Yeah, I mean, it's the energy that you come in there with, really, to me, like, you're setting the tone. You're setting the tone for the mother to be calm, to really be grounded in her birth, to make sure that people who are around her are on the same note, that they're there to provide positive and, because some people get nervous. Like, some people may not be supportive, or, they may want to rush it, but to know that, okay, we are all here to support her and her birth, and, setting that energy, being spiritual, whether she wants to do prayers, something that really gets her in the spiritual mood, because this is spiritual. Like, you have this, the spirit who has come, the spirit has coming through you. You're here to birth this other human being, and you really have to be in with grounded in yourself, and know that this is all spiritual. It's a blessing. It's a blessing, to be able to have someone come to you, to hold them for 9 months in your in your womb, and any woman will tell you that they have these experiences like and for those who might remember, people, we experience things, and when we're in the womb, and it's all a spiritual experience, and setting a spiritual, peaceful tone, for the child to come through is so important. To set that spiritual safe space for the mother is very, very important.
So I would think prayer, as you say, the whole positive energy and the life force of the universe, if you want to talk about that, the need for calmness and peace, but at the same time, just that whole, as you go talking, I'm going back many years to my birth, and I was like, oh yeah, you know, the things that go on, you know, from the embryonic state right up to the being born, you know, the coming out party, so to speak, and how that infant has already acquired a lot of experience because it's necessary. It's necessary to have them connected immediately, you know, to that, and then the carrying on. But wish we had more time. But one other question is, you say that life, that near-death experience as a mother, you know, because at that point of, you know, that child is coming out, you know, you're going.
It's so, anything can happen in that moment. That in and of itself is a life or death experience. So to add like external pressures and external like harm and not caring and not feeling like a sacred, safe space, that really like dictates the outcome of that birth.
Where can they get information? You had a pamphlet. Can you hold
Yes.
it up for just a minute?
Yes.
Sure.
Okay. And that says be
It's
respectful.
the New York City Standards for Respectful Care at Birth, and for them to know what their rights are and what they deserve to have.
Where can they get that information?
They can
New
go.
York City Health.com.
NewYorkCityHealth.com. And there's a line there also. Amen. This has been Illumination, and this is, I said, been a program as we talk about the goodness of God. We also had our two wonderful guests tonight, Ms. Farrah Lee,
Ayodele, St. Louis.
Ayodele, St. Louis,
Don't you
and Ms.
Sankofa Ra.
Sankofa Ra. A wonderful midnight. This has been a wonderful conversation. Tune in again for our future episodes. We're going to continue to bring the word, but we have to continue to educate our brothers and sisters on the importance of childbirth. We have to bring these numbers of infant mortality down, far down. They're way over the top at this point. But God is still in control, and He will have the last word. This is Illumination. Thank you for joining us tonight, and we look forward to talking to you and seeing you again very soon. God bless you.